At the beginning of this module, I had you take yet another quiz that you did not know the answers to. And I'm sort of sorry about that, but not really. I apologize, but the reason that I do that, which you may have already figured out, is to get you thinking about the ideas and the questions that we want to cover in this unit. I want to get your brains thinking about these mysteries. And in this case, the mystery or the question that I want to ask you is, what is a camera? And what is a photograph? And what do you have to make a camera? And what do you have to make a photograph? So the reason that I like to get into this is because today's photography, digital photography, is super, super complicated. It can be super overwhelming. It's very technical. It involves a lot of software. And most of the things in your digital camera are hidden away from view. They seem kind of mysterious and magical, right? So I want to talk to you about some various different kinds of cameras, starting with a super, super simple one, so that you can really get to the basics of photography, which has not changed. Cameras still work in very much the same way. This very early or very simple rudimentary camera that I'm going to show you works on most levels exactly like the camera in your smartphone. It doesn't have Wi-Fi. But it really is the same thing. I want to get down to those essentials so that you have a really good sense of what a camera is actually doing and what a photograph actually is. This is a camera. This is a really fabulous camera, and I've made a number of photographs with it. A couple of you might be scratching your heads and going, this is like a cardboard box. And it is indeed a cardboard box, but a very special cardboard box. Just to get started, before I show you around the camera, I want to show you a photograph that I made with this camera. Now, this has a lot of what we call motion blur in it, and that's because the exposure was 20 or 25 seconds, if I remember, somewhere in that range. Very, very long exposure, and that has to do with the properties of the camera. But one thing you should notice is that banister on the stairs, super sharp. Now let me also show you the negative, because the negative is the original thing that I made in the camera. So here's the negative, and you can see it's a very large negative. This is a 4x5 negative, and pretty cool, huh? Now that I've shown you that this black box really is a camera because it can take such fabulous photographs, let me walk you around it. The reason I like to start with showing you this camera is because it is a very, very simple camera, and you can see that you really don't have to have a whole lot of bells and whistles in order to make a good photograph. All you need is this black box. So the medium of photography is light, and the first thing that we need to do to make a photograph is to figure out a way to contain light. So what all cameras have, and what the word camera actually means, is it means that it's a dark room. So this is what I call a light type box, or it's a dark room. This is actually two boxes you can see, one slightly smaller than the other. By the way, I made this camera myself. Did I mention that before? I'm very proud. And what's cool about this design is that if you put these two boxes together, one slightly smaller than the other, and if you have a whole lot of tape, which is really important, you can make this into a light type box, because light can't travel around corners. It can go this way, but it can't get back here where we're going to put our light sensitive material. So that's the first thing you need, is you need a light type box. You need light. We've got plenty of that. There are times when we don't have so much light, but we definitely have light now. Then you need a way for the light to get inside of the camera to make the image, right? Inside the light type box. This is called, you'll remember this from the first unit, the aperture. So the aperture, I've been hiding it from you, the aperture on this camera, let me put it the right way up, the aperture on this camera is right here. And there's a close-up of it, so that you can actually see just how very tiny this is. This is what we call a pinhole camera. Some of you might have already recognized that. And the aperture that you can see here really is a pinhole. To make this camera, after I made the box, I took a small piece of aluminum, I poked a pin through it, sanded it down a little bit, and taped it to the front of the camera. So it is a very, very tiny aperture. It lets light in very slowly because it's so small. And that accounts for the very long exposure that I mentioned. One of the disadvantages of the camera, but the advantage of that very small aperture, you might have noticed we do not have a lens on here. Really not necessary because the aperture is so small, it's kind of like squinting your eyes, that it actually makes the image very sharp without a lens. It's one of the biggest misconceptions about photography is that you have to have a lens. A lens is one of the things you do not have to have. So if you said lens, you were wrong. You're going to get a lot of points off. Okay, so there's our aperture. And then we also need a way, if we're going to let light into the camera, as you noticed, we also have to have a way to time how long that light goes into the camera. And so we have a shutter, and it's a very, very elaborate shutter here. I just repaired this morning. It's a piece of tape that actually just gets taped down. So I can just lift it up to expose it, tape it down to close it. And that is our shutter. It just tapes that down. Okay, let's look at one more thing, and that is the other thing that we need. So you're thinking through, we've got light, we have the light tight box, we have an aperture to let the light in, we have a shutter to time the light going in and out. There is one other thing that we absolutely have to make a photograph. It's not a viewfinder, by the way, and it's not an exposure meter. No, it is some kind of light sensitive material to record the photograph. Now I showed you the negative. That was originally looked something like this. This, by the way, has been exposed to light, so it's ruined, but I just want to show you how this works. So I take the camera apart. This is a light-sensitive silver halide film, the old traditional way. We do this in the dark, put it into the back of the camera, close it up. No viewfinder, so we have to kind of guess. Set the camera up in front of the subject, open up the shutter, and wait anywhere from 20 seconds to, I think the longest exposure I did with this was 2 hours. Okay, that is the box camera, and this is about as simple as it can get. When you see the presentation in this unit, you'll see that this is actually as close as I can show you at this moment to the original cameras. So the next camera I want to show you is very, very similar to the first camera, the pinhole camera. This is a 1914 Kodak Brownie box camera. And it really does look very similar to the camera that I just showed you. It's a little bit more sophisticated. This is one of the first consumer level cameras that was manufactured and available for the masses. Very, very popular camera. It actually came out in the late 19th century. This is a little bit later. But it's in really good condition. So let me show you. It actually has a very similar design. It'll look familiar. It has these little tabs that have to be released. And you notice that it really looks just like that same design. 2 boxes that slide together in order to be light tight. Now, the big difference here, there are a few key differences that I want to show you because this is a little step up from the pinhole camera. And one of the first things is that this camera actually has space here for a roll of film. So film would attach here, go over here, attach here, and roll through, and it would make a negative this big. Makes really great photographs. It's a little bit, it's got a beautiful shutter, has no lens, by the way, still, but it has a very nice shutter feature. It's a little bit limited because it only has, like my pinhole camera, it only has one shutter, or sorry, one aperture. The aperture on this camera is about, I bet it's about f32, something like that, maybe, no, it's probably more like f16 or f11. And the shutter, oops, yes, I have to turn it around this way. The shutter is at about a 60th of a second, but it's very, very controlled. It's a little dial here. So you notice there's no lens. There's just that little black box. You can see that. It does have, by the way, a viewfinder. Some of these early models actually had a viewfinder on 2 sides. This one just has the viewfinder on the top, and you can see that. This one, I think something got knocked loose in there because I can't see anything. But even if I could, these viewfinders were so tiny, they weren't particularly useful or accurate. But it is a step up. So that is the next step up from our pinhole camera and the first really mass-produced popular camera. So the next camera I want to show you is a twin lens reflex. This is Yoshika mat. It's not as old as it looks. It's from the 1970s. But it is a version of the twin lens reflex. It was very similar to twin lens reflex cameras from earlier in the 20th century. And these are compact versions of the twin lens reflex cameras, which were large, which were invented in the 19th century, very early on in photography. So this camera obviously has a lot more going on than the other cameras that I just showed you. A lot more complex, a lot more bells and whistles. But let's just start with what it has in common with those cameras. It has a light-tight body. Now, this is a little different construction. It doesn't have the two boxes that fit together. It has a very compact light-tight system in here. This is the light-tight body. You can see looking out towards the lens. When this closes and it tightens down, it actually cuts all the light out. It takes a roll film just like that box camera. It goes from here across and it takes a square negative, really beautiful square negative. I love this camera. It takes great photos. And let's just pop that shut so I can show you the rest of the features. Now, the most important thing about the twin lens reflex is this twin lens reflex system. And the reflex is really an important thing to understand in light of the camera that you are likely going to use for this class, a digital single lens reflex. So the reflex part refers to a mirror. So in order to use this camera, you focus through this lens, you shoot through this lens, the image comes in here and it hits a mirror and is bounced up into this viewfinder. You can look down into this viewfinder and actually see the image. And there's what it looks like. That's actually one of my dogs hanging out on the back porch. Here's a slightly different angle so you can see what that's like. Now, let's look at a cutaway of this camera so that you can see how that actually functions. So you can see from this diagram that this top lens is actually completely separated from the shooting lens of the camera. So you are going to get a photograph at a slightly different angle from each one, but it allows us to look through the lens while we focus. Remember that those first two cameras I showed you had no method, no good method for seeing what we were photographing. And that is really, really crucial to successful photography, to be able to really precisely see what you're photographing. So that is the twin lens reflex. Very cool camera. So this next camera that I want to show you is a Kodak Retina rangefinder from probably about 1960, maybe a little bit earlier. The original rangefinders come from much earlier in the 20th century, and they were like us. They were really a game changer for photography, especially for people who wanted to do street photography or motion or action photography. These are very small, they're very compact, and that's because they take a much smaller film format than any of the box cameras or the twin lens reflex, or especially the older cameras that took big sheet film. So let me show you inside of the camera. I'm going to show you a couple of cool features about this. So this is the body of the camera. This is the light tight body. If you look here and you have the shutter set, shutter's actually here. You have to advance the film. Very cool. And then when you hit the shutter, you can see that open. And I've got it wide open. I've got it on bulb, so as long as I hold that down, it opens. So the shutter in this camera, like the older cameras, this is very similar, and this is true of all rangefinders. The aperture and the shutter are the same thing. There's just a mechanism that opens up the aperture and lets it close again. It's a little diaphragm. You can probably see that. If any of you are shooting with a mirrorless camera, one of the new mirrorless cameras, which are great, I described those in the first unit. They're very different things than a single lens reflex, and there's advantages and disadvantages. So the rangefinder cameras and the mirrorless cameras have a different viewfinder system. There's no reflex to show the image through the lens, so you actually look through an approximation. And in a mirrorless camera, you look at a live LCD screen, which is an approximation. So you're actually looking at a slightly different version of your image. Okay, take a little break, stretch, breathe, And when we come back, we're going to take a look at the single lens reflex camera and a little bit of your DSLR.